people who do well tend to have. AI is one big blue ocean opportunity. The second is, in January of this year, we had a major breakthrough. We realized that
You've reached Toby and Brent. We'll get back to you.
What an incredible night last night. I hope you guys had fun.
Absolutely tore up the dance floor.
Yeah, Dylan Francis, he had a great performance. I mean, he had a whole DJ lineup going on. And, obviously want to say thank you to you guys as well for coming on, co-hosting the event with us and bringing 2.3 thousand people into this venue.
I mean, those are the ones who got in. The line was much longer outside.
The line was even longer, yeah. So, I hope we don't get any troubles with MBS at this point in time. No, but very, very excited to also have you here today for a more intimate discussion, not in a nightclub. And because, you guys are doing incredible things in the Bitcoin space. And I just want to kick it off, get to know you a little bit more. We had a side chat already, but give us a rundown. Who are you? What are you guys doing? And why are you excited about this?
So I'm Yago. I'm like, the world's most conservative degen. I've been in crypto now I first got interested in Bitcoin in 2011. At the time I was working on machine learning at Carnegie Mellon, and I actually, because of that, discovered Bitcoin. And
you were in Bitcoin since 2011.
Yeah. So actually, one of the things, like, there's a bunch of people like me who have basically since round about that time been accumulating Bitcoin and have never sold any. And I think, like, the reason I say I'm like conservative, my view has been that the way real wealth gets made is people find 2 or 3 things over the course of their lifetime, if they're lucky. Usually maybe it's only one. Have deep conviction and patience. It's really all about patience. So, a lot of people are into trading or into trying to spot the next winner. But in my view, they're actually, there are going to be just a few things that are trajectory changing. So, Bitcoin was obviously one of them. Ethereum was another one of them. And I think crypto is waiting for the next sort of big one like that.
Yeah.
Well, that mindset is very rare in crypto, to be a long-term investor. Where did that philosophy of yours come from? Because I rarely hear that.
Partly it was just based on the data. So I knew that most people who are engaging in trading do not beat the market.
Oh, of course.
I also am an avid fan of history. And if you look at the historic record of people who do well, families who do well, organizations who do well, they tend to have very, very long time horizons. Patience is, especially in the age of TikTok, it's like the rarest commodity, much more rare than Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so if you have that, you have a huge advantage over everyone. But the other thing is that I think if you're going to what is investing? Investing is basically an attempt to try and predict the future.
Yeah, right.
Very, very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
So if you're going to have any chance at all, I think you need to be able to figure out some kind of fundamental truth, which is not just narrative or not just going to be sort of, okay, I think this is going to get popular over the next 3 weeks, because that's not a fundamental truth. That's you kind of get lucky or you don't.
Yeah.
And when I came across Bitcoin for the first time, it just shouted a fundamental truth to me, because what it was saying is, look, at the time, 2011, the internet had no native economy. The only thing you could do on the internet is advertise. And the reason for that was that there was no such thing as digital property. There was no such thing as digital property rights. And I read the Bitcoin white paper as basically explaining for the first time ever how we're going to be able to generate digital property rights. And not only that, because they're digital and because they use encryption, and for the first time ever, it was creating a new kind of digital right, a new kind of property that didn't require anyone else to protect it for you.
Right.
That's a massive fundamental shift. Like that's like the internet changed humanity's trajectory. AI shifts the trajectory, and Bitcoin, or rather I should say digital property rights and self-control of those property rights, that shifts like human society entirely. So that becomes like, when you find something like that, that's a no-brainer.
What I really like about you guys, because obviously the Bitcoin space has kind of exploded, right, over the last month.
Yeah.
And a lot of L2s came in place, right? A lot of new projects building on Bitcoin and trying to use that for their advantage. But very, very few of them understand what they do at a core.
Yeah, I think that's true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, just go on L2 Watch or whatever, and like you see all these projects and everybody's investing in them because it's a new narrative and it's exciting.
Yeah.
But most of them are like, oh, it's a new train, I'm jumping on it, right? I want to build something. You know, I maybe been Bitcoin a little bit, or hold some Bitcoin, or believe in like the idea of it. But you guys understand the space, right? When I talked to your team the first time, and that was through Calvin, you know, he explained sort of the mindset you guys have on what it does, and I think that is very, very different from most of the other projects out there. So I want to go a little bit deeper into, you know, what you guys are building effectively, but also with your horizon of being long-term in something, you know, being in Bitcoin since 2011, having gone through many, many different cycles and waves and chaos and peace. How did that change maybe also how you guys think about BitcoinOS compared to like some of the competitors out there or some of the other projects out there?
Yeah, so I think if you go back in time to, let's say, 2013, 2012 in the Bitcoin space, the amount of innovation and energy and electricity in the air was insane. Everything was invented then, right? If you go and look at the archives of Bitcoin Talk, it was on Bitcoin that people invented for the first time proof of stake, that people came up with the ideas of the NFTs and ordinals, that people came up with the idea of smart contracts. The first smart contract platform ever was a platform called the Mastercoin, which was built on Bitcoin. And it was actually on Mastercoin, which later became called Omni, that Tether was created, right? So the most valuable sort of crypto asset, most valuable crypto business that's ever been created was created 2013 on Bitcoin, on smart contracts. But Bitcoin was severely limited. And it was sort of realized, even back then, that there's effectively two properties that you need in crypto, right? So one property is the obvious property, and it's the one that we talk about all the time, and it's features. It's things like privacy or speed or low-cost transactions, smart contracts, DeFi, DAOs, all of that stuff. Those are features or functions. And Bitcoin was really bad, even to this day, very, very bad at being able to do any of those things. Yeah. But the other thing, which has almost been forgotten in the mists of time, but actually was the thing that started it all, was the ability to create something totally new, which wasn't software. So if you think about what is software, software is something that upgrades all the time, that can go up and down, maybe, you can connect to it and it works or it doesn't. Sometimes it's backwards compatible, sometimes it isn't. But Bitcoin created something new that wasn't software, that was written in code, but what we can call permaware. It's a system which is extremely simple, doesn't change, and also basically becomes the sort of law of nature outside of human control. Now, why is that so important? If you look at out there, where is all of the wealth being generated and created in the world? Speculation, gambling, Ponzi-nomics, these are important things, but they're a small fraction of the actual global economy. The vast majority of wealth for individuals is in long-term things. It's savings, pensions, mortgages, inheritance. And for institutions, it's long-term things, bonds, infrastructure projects, corporate investments, M&A. These are things that pay themselves off over many, many years or decades, right? And so if you're going to create a system which basically its only purpose is to create property rights, you need those property rights to be able to last for generations, for decades. And So you need a system which is permanent, permaware. So around 2014, we got this weird split in the crypto space. People realized that they were constrained, including, myself. Like, we all wanted to build on Bitcoin, but we were very constrained by the permaware aspect of it.
Yeah.
And then Vitalik sort of went out and he created Ethereum to be able to build the features, right? So we've been on this 10-year journey where permaware's gone in one direction, Bitcoin's gone in one direction, crypto's gone in the other direction. And now we're starting to see how this is starting to fail, right? Bitcoin actually is doing much better because the permaware is the more fundamental part. Without that, you got nothing, right? If you don't have property rights, then you only have gambling, and nobody, and then if all you are is a casino, which is basically what Ethereum has become because it's software, then Solana is just a better casino, right? So all of this was like, you said, like, I'm maybe giving you a bit of a sense of also how I was thinking back then, right? If you can do the fundamental analysis. So for many years, I've been part of a group of people that we've realized that we absolutely have to be able to take these features and the ability to build systems around assets and bring them to Bitcoin. And so that is what BitcoinOS is doing. So after 10 years of working on this, in January of this year, we had a major breakthrough. We realized that we had finally figured out how we can actually write smart contracts into Bitcoin without having to change it. But the problem was the smart contracts were too big. And so we had to find a way to compress them. And then we realized that we could use ZK proofs, zero knowledge cryptography, to compress them into very, very small pieces, small enough to fit into a Bitcoin transaction. So we published a paper in April describing how we were going to do this. And then just a few months later at Bitcoin Nashville, for the first time, we were able to create a Bitcoin address which was owned by no one, was controlled by a smart contract. And we could do all of the computation of the smart contract off-chain, so it was scalable, wrap it into a ZK proof and bring that into Bitcoin. And so we got an ordinal created by the smart contract, and we had Bitcoin controlled by a smart contract, and we were able to send it to an arbitrary address on Bitcoin mainnet. And so that was like, Bitcoin had 853,626 blocks without that capability. And then 6 weeks ago, it got that capability. And so what we're now doing, and we're going to be rolling out over the next few months, the first part of it is already rolled out. We're building an operating system that allows people to take any code, any VM, Ethereum's EVM or Solana's SVM, and compile them down to Bitcoin. And not only that, to make them interoperable with one another. So it's a very, very big project. And without sort of like the 10 years of work or more that sort of preceded by us and many other researchers, it would be totally impossible. But I think it changes everything for what Bitcoin and crypto can and will be over the next 10 and 20 years.
So maybe talk about that more. Like, where do you see Bitcoin next 5 years?
There's one thing I want to say. You probably talked to thousands of founders, and very, very few of them can actually break it down like you.
That was fire. I'm
so happy we're recording this because this is
You're
epic.
going to make me blush.
This is epic. No, honestly.
All right. So where do I think it's going? Well, I think basically what's happened. So in economics, there's this concept of blue ocean opportunity, which happens once in a blue moon, right? What is a blue ocean opportunity? It's when there's suddenly this entire new vista of economic activity that opens up. AI is one big blue ocean opportunity, which has just opened up for the world, highly competitive. I think the second is the ability to start now building smart contracts, scalable rollups, basically all of this functionality, not just for sort of the people who are already in crypto, but for everyone who wouldn't have come into crypto unless they could do interesting things on permaware. And so just one way to think about this, there's hundreds of billions of dollars of value that have been created in like the Ethereum ecosystem. The Bitcoin ecosystem is almost without any of that, is 4 times the size of Ethereum. So if you think about what DeFi on Bitcoin is going to look like just over the next 2 years, right, or probably over the next year, there's a reasonable chance that it sort of surpasses the Solana ecosystem, surpasses the Ethereum ecosystem, and Bitcoin becomes, like the third major and maybe the number one primary ecosystem. So, you started your question in saying, look, there's all of these people out there who are starting to do Bitcoin rollups, and maybe they don't have a fundamental understanding about why, but they have the smell, they have the instincts to know that there's like, this is where the next big narrative is. I think a big part of that is actually some of the papers that we put out. Last year, we put out a paper called Rollups on Bitcoin, which I think was the first major paper that sort of described how it worked. And we actually put it out in partnership with, anyway, so we described that, and that and a few other papers sort of kicked off this. There's now over 100 projects who are building rollups on Bitcoin. And basically all of them are missing this like fundamental ability to compile and actually to roll up to Bitcoin, which is what we're doing. And so in many ways, we're kind of like the last piece that is actually required in order to turn all of that into a real ecosystem.
Make it work.
Yeah. And so, and that's happening next year. So, we're going to be rolling out the testnet before the end of this year. Beginning of next year, we'll be rolling out the mainnet. And so what I suspect is going to happen is you're going to see a lot of really smart entrepreneurs sort of saying, look, I can go to Solana and compete in a very, very competitive environment. I can go to Ethereum and try and create another rollup, but there's like already, it's becoming very, very hard. Or I can go to this environment where it's like the Wild West again. It's fun and exciting again. It's open. The competition is lower. The opportunity is bigger. And so you're going to see the best entrepreneurs going there. And then what happens is when the best entrepreneurs go into a market, and we're already starting to see that happen, then the best VCs follow them. And then the best thought leaders and influencers follow them. And basically it just creates itself, especially in crypto overnight. So I think that's what we see over the next year. Then we're going to sort of hit a wall, right? Because we're basically, you can think of kind of like Bitcoin right now as sort of like China in the year 2000, right? Massive opportunity, totally untapped, and it doesn't need to invent anything new. It can just copy what the rest of the world has done. And so you go from, you suddenly get to 11, 12% growth annualized, right? In crypto, that looks like 120% growth annualized. But then at some point you saturate that and you hit a wall. And then when that wall hits, first of all, there'll be a little bit of disillusionment. But then what's going to be really interesting is that you're going to start seeing Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ecosystem start to do things that we've never seen happen in crypto. And I think the number one thing that we're going to see is real world assets. If you talk to institutional players, they don't give a shit about Ethereum, and they definitely don't give a shit about Solana. They do care about Bitcoin. They hold Bitcoin already. They've sort of gotten used to it. They want to be able to use a platform that isn't controlled by anyone, that is reliable for decades, because that is how long they're going to be holding the assets. And so I think for the first time, we're going to have a platform which lets you actually put a mortgage onto the blockchain, because a mortgage lasts for 30 or 35 years. So you need a blockchain that's going to last for 50, right? You're going to be able to start seeing bonds go onto the blockchain. And so over the next 5 years, I think we're going to see a wave of sort of what we would usually think of TradFi being translated into the blockchain world through the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Amazing. Yeah, I think it's really interesting because one of our theses on investing is looking at companies that are in the Web3 space targeting Web2 users or businesses, right? And I think one of the key points you said is institutions, what blockchain are they comfortable with, or what crypto are they comfortable with? And like the answer is always Bitcoin, right? And so like that is the next logical step. How is that process of, because a lot of companies that we work with and have gotten to know over the last several years, it's tricky, right? Because you're a crypto company, they're institutions, they take much longer. Talk about like how you kind of, because this is like for like, I think the next like billion users and like hundreds of institutions are going to come into the Web3 space. It has to be through a seamless kind of process, and from a branding perspective and like an onboarding perspective. Can you just kind of talk about that more, and like how you guys are like positioned to like bring these like guys on? Because like that's like where the next.
So this is actually a topic I kind of like talking about because I have a view different from almost everyone else.
I love
Everyone likes saying, let's bring the next billion users. And I also would love to see the next billion users, because if you join crypto, you become financially free and you become financially sovereign. But I got to tell you, next billion users are not going to move anything for crypto. Like, crypto is important to them, but they're not important to crypto. And the reason is that the actual user of a blockchain is not a human. The actual user of a blockchain is an asset. And the next billion people, they have almost no assets, right? Like 10% of the global economy owns on the order of 85% of all the wealth and value. And so the real challenge when you're building a system that is financial infrastructure is not the next billion users. That you do like as a charity, right? It's important for us as humans, but for sort of someone who wants to see crypto succeed, what's actually important is the next $1 trillion, the next $10 trillion that come on board. And you actually don't need many people for that at all. UI hardly matters, right? The institutions don't give a shit. What they care about are infrastructure problems, right? They care about, am I able to get fast settlement? Is the system reliable? Do I know that it's not going to get corrupted or manipulated, either by the developers or a nation state? That's the number one thing that real wealth is trying to deal with everywhere and always is counterparty risk. So if you're Apple, for example, you've got a corporate treasury in the tens of billions, right? You don't keep that money in a bank because you consider that to be too risky. So where do you keep your money? Most of corporate treasuries, and Apple is an example of this, are held in government bonds, particularly T-bills. Right? Because that is known as the risk-free asset. Why is it the risk-free asset? It's not because there's no risk. It's because if the US government goes, then everything goes. Right? There's no one even to protect it, right? So for Apple, right? Apple can't exist without the US government. So for Apple, if any scenario in which the US government doesn't exist, Apple doesn't exist. So it's a risk-free asset for Apple, right?
Yeah.
So what people are looking for always is the ultimate risk-free asset. And Bitcoin in particular, its blockchain and its BTC asset are sort of like the true reflection of a risk-free asset. There's no counterparty risk there whatsoever. So that is a really, really exciting thing. And if you look at like Michael Saylor, he's, a lot of what he says is stupid and nonsense. But it doesn't really matter because his fundamental analysis is actually spot on. The man is turning himself into one of the wealthiest people in the world by understanding just one thing, right? Which is that there's a huge amount of money there chasing a risk-free asset, and the easiest way for them to get it right now is through him. The ETF, right? Look at the difference between the Bitcoin ETF and the Ethereum ETF. Ethereum ETF did nothing. The Bitcoin ETF has seen huge influxes and huge flows of capital. Why? Because although it's not directly risk-free, because you actually are holding, you're not holding Bitcoin directly, for the institutions, it eliminates all of the risks except for the custodian. And so it is a very, very powerful risk-free asset tool. So I think, people frequently are looking at crypto the wrong way. They think of crypto as like a technology play or a software play. It's not. We don't need users. We don't need UX. We hardly need apps in the way that we're currently thinking about them, right? So the fact that we can build decentralized social media like Farcaster is great for us, but for the success of crypto, hardly matters at all. What we really need is the next trillion, 10 trillion, 20 trillion.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. And I think like this is like a challenge for a lot of crypto companies is, call it the TradFi fintech space in the kind of startup ecosystem where, You go to Web3 funds and they say you're not crypto enough. And then you go to Web2 funds and they go, well, you're in crypto. Right. But like this delta, to your point, is like that's where the next $1 trillion is going to come from in these like verticals. But and especially on the B2B side and the institutional side. And yeah, I love your saying about it's not the next billion users that matters. It's the next $1 trillion that like matters. Because yeah, that's true. And like and you think about just every bank globally, like these treasury issues, like it doesn't matter what country you're from or where you are, like they all have the like same challenges. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I guess like for you, like how do you kind of, see like outside the next like 5 years, like what are the institutions that you see are like need like the most help like with this? Like is it primarily tech companies? Is it banks? Like who are the ones where the next like couple years, like these are like the institutions that like have the most urgent? Yeah.
So it's going to be 3 types of institutions initially: family offices, corporate treasuries, and hedge funds. And the reason is those are the 3 least regulated types of capital in the world today, right? It's not going to be government pensions. It's not going to be sort of, sovereign wealth funds. Although actually we've already got like the first sovereign wealth fund sort of buying Bitcoin. But until sort of regulation is going to take a long time. So until sort of you get regulatory clarity, it's going to be family offices, because there it's just like a family or, it's a given individual, and he can say, look, I don't care. I want to go in.
I believe in it. I want to do it.
Corporate treasury, CEO and the board can do the same thing. And hedge funds, like no one lives in the Wild West, in the frontier of the Wild West more than hedge funds, right? And that's exactly what we're already seeing. Like if you look at the big hedge funds, they've already started to move in. Family offices have already started to move in, although they're actually the most, they're much more conservative than hedge funds, and corporate treasuries have started to move in.
But especially in this part of the world, it's incredible how many family offices already have a whole Bitcoin or have exposure at some capacity to it. I think it's also because Asia is a big hub for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, a lot of money in China that moves out, a lot of people in Hong Kong.
I mean, China specifically is a different story, right? But it's actually just like a different theme of the same story, which is having control over your own capital. One of the problems of being wealthy in China is you don't really control your capital, right?
I've seen that many times.
And that is why it's been such a huge advantage to people in Argentina, to people in China, that their government has been trying to screw them over and screw them out of their wealth at exactly the same time that Bitcoin has emerged. Because as a result, some of the biggest holders are Argentinian and especially Chinese, because they sort of were forced to realize the value before most people.
Yeah.
And so, the 3 top Bitcoin holders in the world are all Chinese. They're just, it's really had a significant, and most of them have left China, right? Only one of them, as far as I know, is still there. But I
think one, yeah.
Yeah, but it's just created this entire sort of generation of wealth, particularly in China. Even though in the sort of day-to-day discourse, it's actually probably the US which has been leading the discourse on Bitcoin.
Yeah, and then I think just as we're about to wrap here, I would love your take on a different topic, which is elections coming up in the US.
One question before that.
Sure.
Why BitcoinOS?
Well, because it's a very boring name in a way, because it just says what it does on the tin, right? It's an operating system for Bitcoin. You can now take any code and compile it to Bitcoin. So what is an OS? An operating system is you've got the hardware of the phone, you've got the apps on the phone. The OS is what sits between them. It's like the middleware that connects all of the apps to the CPU and to each other. And so what we're doing is we're basically treating Bitcoin as the world's largest CPU. We're allowing anyone to build anything on it, and we're connecting them to that CPU and to each other, making the whole thing just one sort of coherent. Bitcoin is just going to be a single ecosystem of this financial activity.
I love when the business is also part of the name.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Also, it ended up, we only discovered this later, but the fact that you can then like have a hat that says boss is pretty cool.
That's also pretty sick.
It's pretty boss.
I love that.
Very, very true. Very true. I love that. But yeah, just would love your take just really, really quick. Yeah. What do you think with like elections, like how that will affect Bitcoin? Do you think there'll be a major shift either way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the long term, it doesn't matter. We're all going to the same place. In the short term, this is the first election that has actually mattered ever, right? It's like the first time that you can actually go to the polls and vote yourself to like quadruple your net worth. Because if you're holding Bitcoin, if you're mostly in Bitcoin or crypto, and you sort of vote for Trump, you basically are like, and he wins, you basically are like the day after he wins 4 times richer. No politician's going to do that for you, right? There's not a policy in the world that does that for you. So this is actually an election that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said. Well, thank you for coming on, man. This has been,
I feel a lot smarter.
I feel a lot smarter.
I love
seriously. It. Yeah. This is very
this is money here.
Yeah.
Thanks for breaking this down.
Seriously.
It's going to be amazing for the audience also.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
For sure.
Anytime.
See you guys.